to keep people away from dangerous areas. And so when a building, is a genuine risk, and there's clearly buildings that are genuine risks, and the City Council as well will barricade up the building, put that what's called a red sticker on it, a Section 124 notice, and say stay out, they're obliged, no matter how much people say, I don't mind, there's a 1 in 100 chance that it'll come down on me, but I'll take that chance to get my laptop. The officials are obliged to keep them away. And people make some pretty short-sighted decisions in those situations, and it's well recognised that people underestimate risk, that they're wildly optimistic. It's the classic "it won't happen to me" problem, and of course when it all goes wrong, we can see why we have those precautions in place.
If your car though is sitting just on the opposite side of that barrier and all you have to do is hop in, turn it on, drive it out.
My car was just on the other side of the barrier, and the basement car park was slowly filling with water, and I could easily have gone in and got it. But that was some time ago now, and it's long gone. And I wasn't allowed, and I can see why, because the building on top of it was unstable. Ultimately, it didn't come down. It didn't come down, by the earthquakes anyway. But, you can see why people because people are very short-sighted, and it's just there. That's exactly the situation when people will make a decision which they may well regret. And look, I understand that, it's your choice, it's your life, go for it. But I guess it's one of those situations where people are in such shock and dismay, and shock can last for quite some time, that they do need a little bit of a helping hand.
All right, you've been very eloquent. I just want to throw one more example at you, which is maybe a halfway house example. And it's a quote actually from one of the people who's been a bit professionally dispossessed in Wellington. They started to reopen the library, but then realised that all those light fittings up top needed to be replaced because they came loose in the earthquake and can potentially fall down on customers. And I suppose, Stephen Franks has been writing about this, and I suppose he would say, tell the people about the light fittings, let them decide.
Yeah, well, Stephen Frank's view is very individualistic, and he's also so anti-bureaucrat that he would be saying, look, these officials are just making life difficult because they've become power crazed, and I think that's a little unkind. I'm not saying look, clearly not every decision is correct, but the officials must err on the side of caution. And certainly you want to measure the risk appropriately. If a soft cardboard ceiling tile is going to fall on the floor, and it only weighs 200 grams, it's not a big risk. But if it's a heavy light fitting that's going to fall 20 metres onto someone, let's be very, very cautious about that.
Thank you. Alan Reid.
I have nothing to add. I agree. That can change my mind completely. I guess I would have thought, you just nip in, it's not a problem. But no, I won't be going past any cordons, Duncan, I promise.
Yeah,
I can't... Yeah.
It's too tragic. Honestly, and quite soberly, it's just too tragic. We saw parapets fall on people, and they were taking, it's just so horrible.
Duncan Webb, thank you very much for being on the panel today. Dismayingly, we have run out of time with so much yet to discuss. But never mind. What we did discuss was well discussed. Alan Reid, very good to have your company too.
Pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely weekend, and we'll be back on Monday with the panel. Checkpoint with John Campbell is coming right up.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, we're there as the inland road from Kaikoura briefly reopens to private vehicles for the first time since last week's earthquake. Part of the Queensgate shopping centre in Lower Hutt will be urgently demolished, but 80 shops have reopened. We're there. Residents of Goose Bay, evacuated because of fears a dam may burst its banks, apologise to Civil Defence and say, yep, Civil Defence, you got it right. And the West Coast Regional Council apologises after issuing a warning the Alpine Fault was about to rupture. Plus, with just a month until Christmas, it's time to turn the Christmas lights on, but this is no ordinary tree. All of that after the news at 5 with Paul Bremen.
RNZ News at 5. No mai, haere mai, good afternoon. I'm Paul Brennan. Dozens of private vehicles have been able to leave Kaikoura today by road for the first time since last week's big quake. The authorities opened the inland route through to Culverton between 1 and 3 o'clock this afternoon. Tim Graham reports.
About 20 cars and 30 four-wheel drives were allowed through first before a group of 15 trucks and camper vans. A stock truck, petrol tanker and some power company vehicles were allowed through at the tail end. Until now, Army convoys have been the only vehicles allowed on the road, which is still prone to slips. Crew on board a helicopter monitoring the journey say it was all going to plan on the road, which was badly damaged in the earthquake. Also today, household toilets and showers were cleared for use in Kaikoura. Civil Defence says showers should only be used every second day and kept short to help with water conservation. Tap water should continue to be boiled for drinking. This is Tim Graham.
A cinema complex and multi-floor parking spaces for 300 cars at Lower Hutt's Queensgate complex will be demolished because of the earthquake damage. The Hutt City Council has deemed the buildings unsafe, and their owner, Diversified New Zealand Property Trust, announced their demolition this afternoon. Quake damage means more than half the shops in the Queensgate Mall could be out of action for up to 3 months. A big financial blow in the lead up to Christmas. The chief executive of Stride Property, which manages the mall, Peter Alexander, says they should have a time frame on the demolition early next week.
We're putting together methodology for demolition, and out of that will come a program. We'll have that done by Monday night. I would think a job like that's probably 2 to 3 months, but I don't know. I'm not an expert.
Peter Alexander says affected shops are independent retailers and won't be covered by the mall's insurance. The Economic Development Minister, Stephen Joyce, insists no decision has been made on whether to give financial assistance to quake-affected Wellington businesses. While Kaikoura businesses have been given access to a wage subsidy to keep themselves and their staff afloat, that assistance has yet to be extended to firms in Wellington. The Mayor, Justin Lester, says he's optimistic that will be the case. However, Mr Joyce is preaching caution. He says a relatively small number of businesses have been significantly affected and the government can't protect everyone in such circumstances. Mr Joyce says any potential package for Wellington would be tailored and not necessarily be the same as given to Kaikoura. Methamphetamine-fuelled violence is causing a spike in the number of women seeking refuge from their partners in the Upper North Island. Women's refuges in Tauranga, Kaitaia and Waikato say they've had a particularly busy past few months, with a spike in the number of women seeking help for both their own methamphetamine addiction and their partners. Angela Warren-Clark, who runs the Tauranga Women's Refuge, says meth is a factor in 60% of all cases they're dealing with right now. She says women are growing more terrified about the unacceptable nature or unpredictable nature of violence at home.
We're seeing families just run. They're just running. They're just middle of the night running and leaving our community.
Angela Warren-Clark says a lot of women from gang-related families are turning to them for help. The police say there are no signs a newborn baby found in an Auckland reserve yesterday had been injured, but they don't know yet whether he was stillborn. The baby's body was found early yesterday in the suburb of Mangere Bridge. A post-mortem has been carried out, but the police say they can't yet confirm how he died. Detective Senior Sergeant Karen Bright says officers have been visiting hospitals, medical centres and high schools as they try to find his mother.
The key things that we're worried about are mum's well-being, her mental well-being and her physical well-being having given birth. It's a really sad thing and we just want to locate her.
Karen Bright. The police are urging anyone who has information to contact them in confidence. The 7-year prison sentence imposed on a man who pinched a woman guard's bottom is being described as barbaric. The judge who sentenced the 25-year-old says if it wasn't for the government's 3 strikes law, he would not have got more than 1-year sentence. The 3 strikes law forces judges to impose the maximum penalty if a person has been convicted 3 times for certain violent or sexual offences. The Criminal Bar Association says a 7-year sentence for an impulsive 2-second act is barbaric. The sentence has also been criticised by Labour and the Greens, but the Police Minister has declined to comment. State Highway 1 is closed in both directions north of Auckland after a 2-car crash. The police say one person is in a critical condition after the crash in Dome Valley north of Warkworth. Diversions are in place. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 5. Sport now. Play has been abandoned on the opening day of the second cricket test between New Zealand and Pakistan in Hamilton because of rain. The players left the field just before lunch with New Zealand 77 for 2 and were unable to return. The two batsmen out were Tom Latham for 0 and captain Kane Williamson for 13. Opener Jeet Ravel and Ross Taylor steadied the innings, putting on 38 for the third wicket, with Ravel on 35 and Taylor on 29, off just 20 deliveries and striking 6 boundaries. Play will start half an hour earlier tomorrow at 10:30. Meanwhile, the Auckland fast bowler Lockie Ferguson is set to make his international debut after being named in the New Zealand squad for next week's Chapel Hadley one-day series in Australia. A busy international season will finally end for the All Blacks this weekend, but coach Steve Hansen says the Northern Hemisphere tour has been invaluable ahead of next year's series against the British and Irish Lions. The All Blacks play their 14th and final match of the year against France in Paris on Sunday morning, and Hansen believes after last year's World Cup there would have been a lot of soul-searching among Northern Hemisphere sides.
Seen that with Ireland, you're seeing England play well, Scotland are going well. So there's an improvement there, and they definitely play a different style of rugby. So for this young side to come up here and experience that, I think it's been great for us, particularly with the Lions next year, because we're getting a taste of what's going to happen in June.
Steve Hansen there. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life visits the team at Rocket Lab, launching space satellites from the Mahia Peninsula. Trevor Reekie remembers the day the Rolling Stones hired Hells Angels to do gig security. What could possibly have gone wrong? I speak with Norbert Hausberg, entertaining Kiwis with his handcrafted marionettes for 30 years, and we have a sonic tonic dedicated to doctors. On Nights, see how professional if symptoms persist. After the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast taking us through to midnight tomorrow. This is freshly updated from Met Service. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Rain briefly heavy. That should clear up this evening. A few showers tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, high cloud, a few spots of rain. Waikato to Wellington, also Waiata Upper and the Central High Country. Rain briefly heavy. That should ease to a few showers this evening. Showers tomorrow, some heavy in the west. Northwesterly gales for Wellington and Waiata Upper tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, rain should clear this afternoon. Further rain tomorrow though. Heavy and possibly thundery falls in the west. Northwesterly gales as well. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, rain heavy at times. Squally thunderstorms and hail and snow down to 700 metres in Fiordland tomorrow. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, heavy rain near the Alps with scattered falls spreading east at times. Northwesterly gales, severe about inland Canterbury. At the Chatham Islands, rain later today and a few showers tomorrow. It's nearly 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Paul. You are with Checkpoint. Thank you for being with us. Just before we move on tonight, 3 people are trapped after a car and a van collided on State Highway 1 in the Dome Valley. Now, that's between Warkworth and Wellsford on State Highway 1. Diversions are in place, but if you're stuck in traffic there, we'd love to hear from you. Text 2101 and we'll give you a call. We begin tonight with the period this afternoon when the stop-go sign on State Highway 70 just outside Kokoda turned from stop to go for the first time in almost 12 days. It didn't last. The traffic was slower than Auckland rush hour and it could only go one way, but it was long enough for people stranded in the town since just after midnight 2 Mondays ago to drive out. They were heading south, eventually for many of them to Christchurch, but first the still precarious trip along that road to Waio. Our reporter Sally Murphy and camerawoman Rebecca Parsons-King were at the roadblock as it opened and the first vehicles began slowly driving through.
Yeah, they'll finally be given the green light to go. We're actually at the cordon here, but further up the road, about 11 k's up, is the official cordon where the road is blocked. And cars, about 20 cars are actually already leaving from there. The lighter cars have to go first. And then behind me there's about 30 four-wheel drives. And as you can see, they're all going to leave sort of within the next 5 minutes. And the plan is for them to leave within 30-second gaps because obviously the road is still significantly damaged and they have to travel pretty slowly.
They have to travel slowly and they have to be separated, right, because there is still a risk of rockfall.
Yeah, like I said, the 30-second separation, and it's actually only 78 k's to Waiau through this back road, but it's going to take them at least 4 hours, so that gives you a sign of how slow they're actually going to be travelling. Now, they've all been briefed and given this little piece of paper which has got all the rules on it. So they've all been registered here, they've been given numbers, and then on the other end they'll have to sort of sign in so that Downer and Civil Defence can make sure that everyone makes it through. But they've pretty much been told you have to drive for 4 hours straight, you can't stop. Even if you get a puncture, you've just got to keep going until there's a safe way to turn off.
78k in 4 hours, so they're going 20k an hour. It's extraordinary. That route is, to steal a phrase from Christchurch after their quakes, munted. Sally, who are they? Obviously it was some people who were visiting Kaikoura as tourists who were leaving, but are some locals getting out as well?
Yeah, we have spoken to a few locals who are pretty keen to get out of here as well. Obviously things in Kaikoura are starting to get back to normal, but there's no sewerage, there's still no water, and food supplies are sort of running a bit low. So I think people are just eager to get back to normality, maybe go to Christchurch for a bit. But we also spoke to some elderly people in their camper vans who have just popped up here for the weekend and then obviously got stuck here for over 2 weeks with the earthquake. But also there's been a lot of tourists who are here on working holidays with their camper vans who just didn't want to leave their vans and helicopter out, and we spoke to a few of them earlier this morning.
Oh, we're quite keen to leave now. We've been here plenty long enough, yes.
And so why did you come down early?
Well, we thought that if there was a massive queue, they might get to the stage where they say too many. So we thought if we're early in the queue, it's not a bad idea.
And your camper van here, is it four-wheel drive?
No, but it is dual back wheels, which are good, yeah.
And so what if they say that you can't leave today?
Well, then we'll go back to where we stayed at these lovely people's place. Andrew and...
Donna Snow?
Yep. The other side of Kaikoura. They said, come back if you can't get through, we'd love to have you again.
Why do you want to get out today?
We want to get out to continue our journey. We arrived in New Zealand 3 weeks ago, so we spent the first week in the Northern Island, and then we stayed here for almost 2 weeks in Kaikoura. And we want to get out as fast as possible to continue discovering New Zealand.
How much longer are you here for?
3 months in total, 3 months. So we have 2 months and 1 week left.
And what if you can't get out today?
We will wait until the road opens because we don't have any choice.
Well, we're hoping to get out of Kaikoura and get back to our house because we've got a house in Wellington that we rent out and there's been a landslide there, so we like to see what's happened to that and then get home. We can't really travel around too much longer without a caravan because we've sort of geared ourselves for, that sort of staying, haven't we, Ray?
So why were you down this way?
We're going to a wedding in Twizel, which is today. So we're obviously not going to make that. So now we're change of plans, and so we'll head out to Reefton and up to the Nelson area and then go back to Masterton.
How will you feel if you get out today?
Relieved, really. The stay here has been really good. We've stayed down at the campground just at the end here, and they've been marvellous. We've had hot showers and water virtually from the time that the earthquake happened. So out at Paketa, we've stayed there.
And what if you can't get through today?
Well, we'll go back to the campground and look at it another day.
Or sleep in the ute.
Yeah.
We're all geared up for it.
So it depends on where we're going. You know, we're quite confident that we're going to get out today.
Does it worry you going along the road? Have you seen pictures of what it looks like?
Not a lot, but they wouldn't be opening up the road unless it was doable.
So, one by one, and it's fascinating to watch that little car behind you now, Sally. I mean, that is simply not only not an all-terrain vehicle, it's kind of hardly any sort of terrain vehicle as that's getting ready to do this extraordinary run. How are you getting out of there? Because there is a most unusual air service taking place at the moment, right?
Yeah, well, Sounds Air has been chartering in and out all week since the earthquake, so over the last 2 weeks. And for services like reporters, we're not that important, but also the Downer guys and some contractors have also been flying in and out of Christchurch and Blenheim. So basically what they do is they'll pick a load up from Christchurch Airport, fly here, it only takes about half an hour, drop us off, and then the next lot are ready to get on. The plane doesn't even turn off and we're out again. So we're actually heading off shortly and our next team is going to be dropped in.
That was Sally Murphy as people were setting out on that journey, 4 hours to do 78k. They have made it, or are making it as we speak, and we will speak to some of the people who've made the journey later in the program. But let's go from Kaikoura and State Highway 70, 150k north to Wellington, and we're going to start in the Hutt Valley. The quake-damaged cinema complex and part of the car park at Queensgate Shopping Centre in Lower Hutt are to be urgently demolished. The Hutt City Council announced last night that the buildings were unsafe, and the owner, Diversified NZ Property Trust, announced their demolition plans this afternoon. Eric Frickberg went out to the region's largest shopping mall and found that while part of the complex was shut and even condemned in one corner, shoppers were returning to the premises that were open.
The sound of workers hammering in scaffolding to support a car park that the City Council fears could collapse. These men were joined today by a demolition team after the building owners considered, then rejected the alternative of earthquake strengthening. Demolition will now proceed urgently because the series of earthquakes that began in Kaikoura last Monday has made the building unstable. But this is a two-sided story. Queensgate Mall, the largest such complex in the southern North Island, is made up of 13 separate buildings, and many of them fared well enough for customers to return for shopping this morning after being kept away due to the quakes.
It's my first time going in and I'm quite nervous about it, obviously, but we'll just have to push on and get through it, I suppose, yeah.
I've got my torch and I've got my radio in my pocket, ready to go in.
I'm fine once it's been checked. I'm okay, but it's a concern.
The mall is managed by a listed property company, Stride Investment Management. Its chief executive, Peter Alexander, says 80 shops have reopened and he insists it's safe for people to return there.
We've been through a very rigorous process. We've got experts who are very familiar with these situations. Council have issued a certificate of public use. The question we've been asking ourselves is, are we confident to have our staff here, our families here and our friends here? That's the standard we judge it by.
But another 60 to 70 shops within Queensgate remain shut because of their proximity to 7 cinemas and the car park. Also, some buildings outside the complex are affected because they lie within what engineers view as a drop zone where falling debris could hit them. A New World supermarket on Bloomfield Terrace is one, so is the Angus Inn on the same street, where a barrier runs through the middle of the lobby like the Berlin Wall. On one side, the business can run, on the other side, it's a no-go zone. The hotel's managing director, Peter Norrie, is worried that this will cost him vital business at a hectic time of the year.
We've had to close our restaurant, our function rooms and a large bar area. It's going to be at least a couple of weeks before we'll be able to open the areas which are now closed. It's a biggie, and I mean we've got a wedding for 140 people on the 10th, and then of course we've got 250 people booked already for Christmas lunch.
It's not clear how long the demolition will take, but nearby businesses are hoping it'll be quick. For Checkpoint, Eric Frickberg.
In the Wellington CBD, businesses who've had to shut doors because their premises are quake damaged or because they're beside premises that are crying out now for help. The city's mayor, Justin Lester, is in talks with the government aimed at extending the financial support package offered to Kaikoura businesses to those in and around the capital. He's optimistic that will happen, although the Economic Development Minister, Stephen Joyce, insists no decision has been made. Here's our reporter, Max Toll.
Demolition began on a damaged building on Molesworth Street yesterday, and at least 3 others are earmarked to be brought down in Wellington. Dozens of other buildings have been shut or cordoned off since last Monday's quake. Shonick McLeod runs the Word of Mouth Cafe in New Zealand Rugby House, which is behind the cordon on Molesworth Street. She says her company is losing money and can't afford to pay staff.
This is our busiest time of year. We've got all sorts of Christmas stock in the shop. We have a little giftware section. We were given 15 minutes to go in and grab what we could. It's just really hard working without knowing when we're going to be able to get back in.
Shonick McLeod contacted the government Quake helpline to ask about financial assistance and was initially told to apply for the Kaikoura Business Support Package.
The word came back that we couldn't apply because we were in Wellington, but if we had staff that were desperate for money, they could go into WINS and apply for an emergency benefit. So one of my girls did go in, but then she was told that she couldn't apply, and I had to apply on her behalf under the earthquake package. So it has been quite frustrating that we can't help them.
Tony Freeman operates a bookshop in the same building and is pessimistic the government can help him.
Basically, we are a family business, and the two of us run it in the main, with some other family stepping in. It will depend entirely how the thing is worded, but at this stage, I can't see it being of any help to us if I understand it to be associated strictly to wages.
Wellington City Mayor Justin Lester says he is talking to Stephen Joyce about how many buildings and businesses have been affected, and he's hopeful support will be given to the capital.
Very similar in terms of their response to Christchurch and Kaikoura, where businesses are supported by the number of employees they have, permanent employees. So I think that's worked well in the past, and it's likely to work well for Wellington.
Stephen Joyce says no decision has been made, and he plans to talk to Mr Lester again next week.
It's a relatively small number of businesses that are affected for a significant period of time, and we're just getting a better understanding of which ones are able to move and not able to move and so on. But you can't actually protect businesses against every turn down in revenue from something like this, and businesses all over the top of the South Island and the lower North Island will have some sort of impact.
Mr Joyce says any potential help for Wellington businesses would be tailored and would not necessarily be the same as was offered to Kaikoura. But Tony Freeman and his bookshop might be in luck, with Mr Joyce saying help could be extended to sole traders. For Checkpoint, Cormac's Toll Tene.
5:21. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. We speak to a family coming up, cut off from the outside world since the quakes 11 days ago. They have just made it into Kaikoura town for the first time. Methamphetamine-fuelled violence causes a spike in the number of women seeking help from women's refuges, and the police are scouring hospitals, medical centres and even schools in their search for the mother of a newborn baby found dead in an Auckland reserve yesterday. All of that coming up before 6 o'clock. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook. Of course, you can text us on 2101 and email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. A false alarm from West Coast Civil Defence that warned the Alpine Fault could be about to rupture, which is a big thing, has been labelled as irresponsible and sparked calls for a review. Last night's warning, signed off by the Regional Civil Defence Head, Chris Rain, said there was a heightened risk because of last week's earthquake near Culverden. The warning, which has since been well and truly retracted, has left a sour taste in the mouths of many coasters. Conan Young reports.
The urgent warning took the form of a press release from West Coast Civil Defence Group Controller Chris Rain and said that the GeoNet seismograph drums had been very quiet in the past few days. It said in contrast the Alpine Fault had been generating a series of small earthquakes and that Civil Defence was monitoring this area closely. It asked West Coasters to stock up on enough food, water and medicine for 7 days and strongly urged people to be prepared. The Wellington-based Director of Civil Defence, Sarah Stewart-Black, says the scientific advice is there is no heightened risk of an aftershock along the Alpine Fault as a result of the quake near Kaikoura.
There was a lot in the release that was not factually correct. There is a need to ensure that public information is consistent and coordinated, which is why I'm looking for the Chief Executive of the West Coast Regional Council to ensure that this doesn't happen again. The statement was retracted and there was an apology issued, so I'm very pleased to see that.
There were reports of water and bread selling out at some West Coast supermarkets in the wake of the warning. The Grey District Mayor, Tony Cockshawn, says Civil Defence West Coast acted irresponsibly.
So it's important they don't spook the public out there who are very on edge at the moment. We know we've got a big fault line down in the Southern Alps, but that has no relation to what's going on at the moment. So people need to be assured that there's nothing to panic about.
Tony Cockshawn says he's been taking calls from tourism operators asking if they should be cancelling bookings in light of the warning. He says this is the last thing businesses need heading into peak season, and he's confident the same mistake won't be repeated.
This is a major mistake, and he will be talked to, and there will be put in place a pecking order that makes sure that he has to report to the right people and go through the right channels before he makes media releases.
Chris Rain's boss is the West Coast Regional Council Chief Executive, Michael Meehan. He says an apology has now been issued.
No person other than experts should make any of those kind of predictions. So, Our role in this is in a civil defence response role, and we use the information that the people like GNS put out. We don't make predictions.
Michael Meehan refused to say if Chris Rain would face disciplinary action, but confirmed he was still in charge of civil defence for the region.
Chris Rain has got a lot of experience in civil defence. This has been a mistake, and I think we've gone a long way to rectify it. And look, we'll sit down and talk about it.
Tony Cockshawn is calling for a review of the way civil defence is organised to prevent local branches from putting out releases independently of civil defence in Wellington and sending out mixed or confusing messages to the public. For Checkpoint, ko Conan Young tēnei.
Methamphetamine-fuelled violence is causing a spike in the number of women seeking refuge from their partners in some parts of the country. The Tauranga Women's Refuge says some women are so terrified of the meth-induced violence that they're fleeing the city altogether. Our police reporter, Carla Penman, has the story.
Women's refuges in Tauranga, Kaitaia and Waikato say they've had a particularly busy past few months, with a spike in the number of women seeking help for both their own methamphetamine addiction and their partners. In Tauranga, the refuge manager, Angela Warren-Clark, says meth is a factor in 60% of all cases that the city's women's refuge is dealing with right now.
What we're finding with methamphetamine use is that previously, if a partner was violent, that there was a series of predictability around the behaviours. So families who were walking on eggshells could really identify quite easily that something was coming and actually try and manage his violence. But what has happened now with methamphetamine is all bets are off.
Angela Warren-Clark says meth-related violence has caused a tremendous amount of work, not to mention devastation for the affected families. She says there's a sense of desperation among the women who are fleeing partner violence, given the huge difficulty in finding accommodation in Tauranga now.
We're seeing families just run. They're just running. They're just middle of the night running and leaving our community. We are seeing a lot of our families who have gang-related families who are within the gang system. A lot of our women there who are very good at managing and surviving within that environment are actually coming to us and seeking help.
Further up north, the head of the Kaitaia Women's Refuge, Waimaria Veza, says in August their 24-hour crisis line received 45 calls, which then doubled to 90 in September and spiked to 168 last month.
A lot of the issues that women are ringing about are around methamphetamine, the use of it by their partners, the effect that it has on the women and children in the home, no food, violence, unable to pay their accounts, and it just goes on.
Ms Veza says the Kaitaia Refuge is alarmed by the huge increase in cases. The police have referred to it recently.
In September there were 57, and October it's increased to 146.
She says meth is a common factor in those cases. Raywin Curtis is a team leader at the Waikato Women's Refuge Te Whakaruruhau. She says just the other day she referred 5 women for protection orders within 45 minutes. Ms Curtis says she's also noticed a stark rise in the past 2 months in the number of women complaining about meth-fuelled violence.
Probably more so that at the moment than alcohol. The pee, it's just, it's funny. We were talking, me and one of the other team leaders were talking yesterday. We were wondering if there was a different sort of batch out there because the women are coming in really scared and really terrified.
Raywin Curtis says both them and the women are perplexed.
Women have said to me, Fire, I've never seen him this crazy. It's like, something had taken him over. He's never been like that before. He's always been, an idiot, but not to this point. And we're seeing a lot of that. So, and I was talking to a cop yesterday and we were talking about it too, and he said, funny, some of us were wondering that too.
Last month, the government announced $9 million would be spent on a range of health-related alternatives to fight the war on pee, including $3 million on reducing the drug's demand in Northland. For the woman caught up in the cycle of meth-related domestic violence, that money can't come soon enough. For Checkpoint, ko Carla Penman tēnei.
It's 5:30. We're getting a lot of people texting us from State Highway 1, Plimerton and north, heading up the Kapiti coast there, saying they are basically stationary. People saying the traffic is almost still or incredibly slow moving. And we're trying to find out what on earth is going on. So many of you are contacting us, so stay with us. I guess you're trapped in your cars for the time being. We're calling the police, trying to work out what is the cause of those delays north of Plimerton on State Highway 1 and north of Warkworth on State Highway 1, Dome Valley between Warkworth and Wellsworth. There's been a nasty crash here. We'll have more on that after the news. The police have been scouring hospitals, medical centres and high schools as they try to find the mother of a newborn baby found dead in an Auckland reserve yesterday. The baby boy's body was found early yesterday in the suburb of Mangere Bridge, and the police are worried about the well-being of his mother. The Detective Senior Sergeant Karen Bright told our reporter Rowan Quinn they've released pictures of distinctive clothing found with the baby in the hope that someone will recognise these clothes.
This morning a post-mortem was conducted, and at this stage it's still inconclusive as to whether or not the baby was stillborn, but we can say that there was no obvious signs of injuries to the child. In the last 24 hours we have been going to the local hospitals, medical centres and approaching high schools in the hope that we could identify the child's mother. But at this stage we are just missing that crucial piece of information, so we'd urge anyone who knows anything to please come forward and contact the police, and they can do that in confidence.
What are the challenges in this kind of situation? What are the things that are worrying you, I guess?
The key things that we're worried about are mum's well-being, her mental well-being and her physical well-being having given birth. It's a really sad thing, and we just want to locate her, and we urge her to come forward, or anyone who recognises these items of clothing to please come forward and contact your local police.
That's Detective Senior Sergeant Karen Bright. Coming up, Auckland Police investigate the third case of someone trying to entice a child into a car in just 2 weeks. The 7-year prison sentence handed down to a man who pinched a prison guard's bottom is being slammed as barbaric, grotesque and entirely unjust. This is under the 3 strikes law, of course. And we're going to update you on these traffic situations occurring on State Highway 1 north of Wellington and Auckland. But first, here's Paul with the headlines.
Thank you, John. Our headlines this hour: a cinema complex and multi-floor parking spaces for 300 cars at Lower Hutt's Queensgate complex will be demolished because of earthquake damage. The damage means more than half the shops in the Queensgate Mall could also be out of action for up to 3 months. About 70 vehicles joined an exodus out of Kaikoura today on the partially opened inland road through to Culverden. The cars, four-wheel drives and light trucks were the first non-army vehicles allowed to use the earthquake-damaged road. Meanwhile, a driver in the convoy says the drive this afternoon was a doodle. Gary and Janine Smith drove out in their four-wheel drive. Mr Smith says the road repairs are excellent and his grandmother could make it through in a shopping basket. The police say there are no signs a newborn baby boy found in an Auckland reserve yesterday had been injured, but they don't yet know whether he was stillborn. The baby's body was found in the suburb of Mangere Bridge, and police today released photos of clothing found near the baby. Methamphetamine-fuelled violence is causing a spike in the number of women seeking refuge from their partners in the Upper North Island. Women's refuges in Tauranga, Kaitaia and the Waikato say they've had a particularly busy past few months, with more women wanting help for both their own methamphetamine addiction and their partners. The 7-year prison sentence imposed on a man who pinched a woman guard's bottom is being described as barbaric. The judge who sentenced the 25-year-old says if it wasn't for the government's 3 strikes law, he would have got no more than a 1-year sentence. The Criminal Bar Association says a 7-year sentence for an impulsive 2-second act is barbaric. And State Highway 1, as you've been hearing, north of Auckland, is likely to be closed for at least 2 hours after a 2-car crash. The road is closed in both directions in the Dome Valley north of Warkworth after the crash in which several people had to be freed from damaged cars. Those are our headlines. Our next news and sport will be at 6.
Thanks, Paul. Just going to update the traffic situation. We have absolutely no explanation yet. If you were stuck in traffic on State Highway 1 north of Plimmerton, why it is so slow heading up the Kapiti Coast, we have absolutely no idea. We're desperately trying to get someone to explain it, but lots of you are texting us and saying, even by the appallingly bad standards of that road out of Wellington, it is abysmal tonight. We do want to say State Highway 1 north of Warkworth. If you don't know Auckland very well, Warkworth is about an hour north of Auckland. It's busy heading north on Friday night. There are diversions in place at Wayby Road, Wayby or Wayby Road, Wayby Valley Road, State Highway 1, and at Kaipara Flats Road South. So traffic is getting north, but it is very, very slow, and motorists are asked to be patient. And whilst we're doing traffic news, in Rolleston, which of course is just outside Christchurch, the railway barrier arm is broken. And so I think that's at Hoskins Road. So there is a backup of traffic there as people do U-turns and try and work out alternative routes. We will update you on all of this stuff as we go on. Speaking of updating you on developing news, Giles Beckford joins us live from Wellington now to update us on the business week, Giles, and how it closed, and also 2 takeover battles that have been taking place.
Good evening, John. Yes, usually takeover battles are sort of cut and dried generally. The forces who want to take over the company, they do the deals quietly, negotiate the price, and it all sort of trundles along quite nicely without too much biff. But I have to say that we've got a couple of issues at the moment, a couple of takeovers or potential takeovers, which are attracting a wee bit of niggle about them. Now, one of them is, first of all, with Abano Healthcare. Now, most people won't know that name, but they will know the name of Lumino the dentists. And one of Abano's major shareholders, former director Peter Hudson, and interests who are associated with him, want to take control of Abano. They don't want to buy out the whole company. They just want to buy another 30-odd% to add to the 19 that they've got now, and that would give them majority control. Now, there's been a lot of toing and froing, and there's a lot of paperwork that goes with takeover battles, or takeover offers, we should say. And in this case, Mr. Hudson has had to file his notice 3 times, the official notice, and we won't say that they're gloating or that they're gleeful in the Abano boardroom, but they're not particularly, shall we say, upset that Mr. Hudson's run into some discomfort and a little bit of difficulty about it. There's no love lost between the board of Abano and Mr. Hudson. He tried unsuccessfully to take over the company in 2013. That didn't go happily. In the end, it resulted in him being forced off the board. And he went away to the sidelines to lick his wounds. He's come back a second time to try and take control of the company. This is one that's going to go on and on and on. The arguments over valuation, arguments over payments of dividends, and I think this will go straight into January, February next year before shareholders perhaps get a chance to make some sort of decision. Now, the second takeover that's on the table at the moment is Bapcor, an Australian car parts company, automotive services, trying to take over Hellaby Holdings. Once again, names that you may not necessarily recognise first up, but Hellaby Holdings have a string of automotive businesses. They also own Hannah's the Shoe Shop and Fish Shoes. So there's a couple of names that people will recognise. Bapcor is trying to take over all of Hellaby's. They're offering $3.30 a share. Hellaby says, too low, opportunistic, go away, raise the price perhaps. The Australians saying, well, we don't want to go away, but we don't want to raise the price either. Well, not at this stage. They've been trading wars, or a war of words about whose valuation is correct, who's misleading whom. They've tried to drag RNZ Business into it because we've run lots of stories on the issue, tried to get us to change our headlines, which might mislead.
Change your headlines,
Well,
Charles.
we had a very simple headline which was said, Bapcor says won't raise takeover price for Hellaby's, and they said, well, we may have said we wouldn't raise it, but we meant not at this stage. And we said, well, that means that you're not raising the offer, and we're not changing the headline. This is another one. Now, the key shareholders, a big shareholding group in Helleby's who have signed up for the takeover, came out today. They clearly, I won't say they've been prevailed upon, but they feel moved enough to say that they're supporting the takeover because it's the best deal going and they don't think that there'll be a better price anytime soon. We'll see if their arguments, which are quite well laid out and simply argued, whether they have any sway with other Helleby's shareholders. This is another one that I think is going to go on and on. And once again, there's a bit of edge in the rhetoric and in the tone of the statements.
Yeah.
Just for once, we have a couple of takeovers that aren't cut and dried, that's not all being run by suits, and a lot of it's actually being displayed out there in public. And from a business journalist point of view, it's a bit of fun.
Excellent. What happened on the markets, Giles, to end the week?
We had a positive finish for our own top 50, up 16.6900. That's close to a 2-week high. The New Zealand dollar, 70.1 US cents and 94.2 Australian. And that's business for another week.
Thanks, Giles. Really appreciate it. Have a good weekend. Giles Beckford, our business editor from Wellington. We turn now to the 7-year prison sentence handed down to a man who pinched a prison guard's bottom. Justice Toogood was forced to hand down the 7-year sentence under the 3 strikes law, despite saying the offending warranted a 1-year sentence at most. This has been slammed as barbaric, grotesque and entirely unjust. Here's our political reporter, Benedict Collins.
Raven Casey Campbell has been sentenced to 7 years for grabbing a prison guard's bottom because it was his 3rd strike. The 3 strikes law dictates a judge must impose the maximum penalty if a person has been convicted 3 times for certain violent or sexual offences. The 25-year-old had already received 1 strike for his first set of offending, which included receiving stolen property, the possession of a knife and robbery, and a 2nd strike for aggravated robbery. Justice Toogood says while it was very harsh, he had no option but to impose the maximum sentence. The president of the Criminal Bar Association, Len Anderson, says it's barbaric.
It is fundamentally wrong that if an offender has committed a sentence that deserves imprisonment for a year, that they should be sentenced to 7 times that simply because of an arbitrary law. And it's barbaric because the sentence is not in accordance with what is seen to be appropriate for the crime.
Another senior lawyer, Robert Lithgow QC, describes the sentence as preposterous and cruel. Labour's Justice spokesperson Jacinda Ardern says the law removes the discretion of judges and should never have been passed.
The judge has indicated that 7 years was disproportionate, and I think it's quite extraordinary to have an experienced judge like Judge Toogood, who has actually given indication of the sentence he would have given had he not had the 3 strikes law requiring him to give the sentence he did.
The 3 strikes law was driven through Parliament by the Police Minister Judith Collins and passed 6 years ago. At the time, she assured the public that the appropriate safeguards were in place, particularly at the 3rd stage of the regime. Today, Judith Collins said she wouldn't be commenting on a judicial decision. But the 3 strikes law was the brainchild of the ACT Party, and its current leader, David Seymour, says the offender got what they deserved.
If you frame this penalty as being only for the most recent offence, yes, you will come to the conclusion it sounds a bit crazy. On the other hand, if you frame it as being the penalty for a series of offences, and some quite serious ones, including aggravated robbery, then you put things in perspective.
But the Greens Justice spokesperson, Materia Ture, says while pinching the guard's bottom was an offensive thing to do, there's no way it justifies 7 years in prison.
This is why we said at the time that this law was stupid and shouldn't proceed, that it was always going to lead to inappropriate and ridiculous sentences that would just massively increase the cost to the country of the prison population and be unjust.
The architect of the 3 strikes legislation and former ACT MP David Garrett says people need to realise that the purpose of the law is to make the consequences exponentially worse for people who continue to re-offend. In 2010, Mr Garrett himself resigned from Parliament after disclosing that he had used a dead child's identity to obtain a false passport in 1984. In 2002, he was convicted of assault in Tonga, and in 2012 he pled guilty to drink driving. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
We've just heard from, just received a text from someone who says, "Hi John, turned around and went over the Paikakariki Hill only to discover traffic gridlocked again at Mackay's Crossing. We are all doomed, no escaping it." We are calling and trying really hard to find out what is the cause of this ridiculous jam north of Plympton heading out of Wellington up the Kapiti coast. It's obviously bad news because we're hearing from so many people about it. We've no idea what's causing it. We will find out and we will let you know. West Auckland Police are investigating the third case of someone trying to get a child into a car in just 2 weeks. In the first instance, an 11-year-old boy was sexually assaulted over a 3-hour period and the offender is still at large. Principals are now warning parents to take extra care and not let children walk alone to school. Here's our reporter Alex Ashton.
The police are still hunting for whoever assaulted the boy just over 2 weeks ago as he walked home from the Ranui train station. They're appealing for sightings of a grey van or anyone seen acting suspiciously near Metcalfe and Swanson roads on Thursday the 17th of November. But since that investigation started, 2 more have been launched. On Wednesday, a man approached an 11-year-old girl in Waitakere while she waited for a bus. And yesterday, another boy in Ranui was approached too. The police say it's too soon to tell if the events are linked, but in the meantime, the area's schools are remaining vigilant.
I'm a parent myself, so if this was happening to my kids, I'd be really, really concerned.
Jenny Bernard is the principal of Birdwood Primary in Ranui.
We've given out a letter to them. We've talked to them about the sort of things that they should do if someone comes up and approaches them, and if something that they don't like and don't feel comfortable with, that they have to move away. All our kids know, because, social media, all that sort of stuff, they know what's going on. And also, of course, their parents, they know, so they've been talking to their kids quite a lot.
Jenny Bernard says they're also telling children not to walk to school alone. Down the road at Summerland Primary, co-principal Barb Dysart is driving home the same messages to the children, which she says can be a difficult conversation.
Yeah, it is, because you don't want to frighten them so much so that it increases their anxiety, but at the same time you want to be able to communicate with them that, there are things there that might hurt them, such as even running. I mean, we talk to them all the time about road safety, so this is another aspect of their own safety.
Jenny Bernard says schools obviously have an important role in keeping children safe, but parents have to have the same conversation.
They need to tell them the importance of, walking home in groups and being safe. And if they're not feeling comfortable about something, just yell, and run away. Go home, tell your parents so that they can do something about it. Really important.
Jenny Bernard says an arrest would be a huge relief to parents, something the police are working on now, bringing in extra patrols around West Auckland schools. They're also working closely with the abducted boy's family. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
Tens of thousands of people are fleeing out of control wildfires that are burning in parts of northern and central Israel. Worst hit is the third largest city, Haifa, which has seen about 80,000 people told to evacuate, and a number of homes and buildings have been damaged. The city's mayor, Yona Yahav, says the large scale of the fires is just unprecedented.
It's the first time in the history of the city that in very many positions the fire broke off and caused damage, and thanks God it didn't cause damage by people. The people didn't get hurt, only property.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says some of the fires were started by arsonists, and anyone found to have deliberately lit them will be treated as terrorists. This report just in from the BBC.
Firefighters in Israel are struggling to stop about 15 fires from spreading. Hot, dry weather and high winds are fanning the flames. Hundreds of homes have been damaged. Speaking at a news conference in Haifa, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said some fires were started by mistakes or negligence, but others were malicious. He said Israel would stand against what he called arsonists' terror and incitement to arson.
Every fire that was caused by arson or incitement to arson is terrorism by all accounts, and we will treat it as such. Whoever tries to burn parts of Israel will be punished for it severely.
Police have already made arrests. Over the past 3 days, there have been some posts on Arab social media celebrating scenes of buildings ablaze in Israel. Several countries, including Russia and Turkey, have sent firefighting aircraft to help tackle the flames. A specialist supertanker plane is on the way from the United States.
That report from the BBC. It's just gone 11 minutes to 6. We're going to return now to the first convoy of private vehicles to leave Kaikoura in the 11, 12 days since the earthquake via that inland route. Remember, of course, State Highway 1 is closed to the north and south. One couple who've nearly completed the journey is Bob and Jill Eva. Bob has kindly pulled over to talk to us. Thank you so much, Bob. How are you going?
Yeah, we're going well.
Good man. So, firstly, what sort of car are you in?
We're in a motorhome.
Okay.
We're in a Fiat up front wheel drive.
Okay, and what was it like? So what is that inland route like in a motorhome, getting along at about 20k an hour, right?
No, it wasn't as bad as that. We were, I suppose, doing 30, 40 k's in places. It wasn't too bad, really, sort of what the place had been through.
Right, and did you look up and see, our reporter Maya Burry went in with the Army yesterday and she said there are a couple of places where you look up and see rocks high above you and think, gosh, I hope they're stable. Did you have that experience?
Yes, we did, and it was quite eerie, actually.
Yeah. It's actually just eerie being on a road that's been closed for these reasons and then suddenly finding yourself on it, I suspect. So obviously you couldn't get out of Kaikoura. You couldn't go on the Canterbury or be airlifted out because you wanted to take your motorhome with you. So what have you been doing since 2 Mondays ago?
Oh, well, we've met up with a lot of Kaikoura people, which is lovely people that we met up with. They helped us out and we helped them out, and we're just talking to each other.
Nice. So you made some new mates?
Yes, we have actually, and hopefully not too far in the distance, we're going to come back and see them again.
Oh, lovely. And where are you from, Bob? Are you doing a big a tour of New Zealand? You've come from Hamilton, Pip saying in my ear. Is that right?
Yes. The wife and I just retired this year, so we're doing about 2.5, 3 months down here, and we're just working our way back to Hamilton for the family Christmas.
Lovely. So you had an experience you weren't counting on, but Kaikoura is a beautiful place, and I suspect they looked after you pretty well, right?
I tell you, there's no complaints from here.
Oh, that's nice. Well, Bob, we'll let you get back to your trip. Bob, just before you go, is that road safe? In other words, do you feel it's safe and passable? And is it 2 lanes all the way, or are there lots of it that are only 1 lane?
No, it's not passable at all. A lot of places there, it's only 1 way, and you've got to be escorted through.
Right.
Because there's big boulders on each side of the road, which you've got to go round. And, it's not a 2-lane road at this stage.
So if that's the answer to Kaikoura's problems, it's a wee way off being a full answer yet.
That'll be true. It's a big job in front of them.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. We really appreciate it. Bob Eva, who, as you heard, is touring the country in his motorhome with his wife Jill from Hamilton. They stopped in Kaikoura, obviously, because it's a beautiful place to be, but they spent rather longer there than they had expected. Another family who spent longer than they had expected were actually in their own home. They were cut off by the earthquakes at home. Chris and Anne-Marie Lidgard's home on State Highway 1, just north of Kaikoura, was cut off by slips in both directions. Their closest neighbours are the seal colony at Oho Point. The family of 4 has spent the past 11 days isolated, but were today flown to Kaikoura by Civil Defence after learning it would be months before the highway surrounding their home would be repaired. Chris Lidgard is the dentist in Kaikoura. He's also a local cafe owner. I spoke to him a short time ago after he'd assessed his cafe for the first time since the quake.
Our home is probably about 14 metres above sea. Well, it was 14 metres. It's probably about 18 to 20 metres now above sea level, and about probably 50 metres or so back from the coast.
And this was a week and a half ago. And when did you get into Kaikoura town where you are now in your own cafe? When did that happen?
Just after midday today. So we, about 3 or 4 days ago, were told that it's going to be probably between 3 to 6 months before they'll get road access back along our northern state highway. So we're our nearest neighbours are the Ohau Point baby seals, and so the Ohau bluffs have just all fallen down, and so there's this massive slip to clear there, and then there's a really big one to the north of our home as well. So we're sort of pretty much isolated out there. We had about 2.5 k's of Highway 1 all to ourselves for, 11 days?
And so for 11 days you were just trapped there. How did you communicate with the outside world?
Well, the first communication we had was on the Tuesday morning. A helicopter landed just to check that we were okay. And then we actually managed to walk out to the north, the slip to the north of us, and met up with one of the local beekeepers. He was on the other side of the slip. He'd just serendipitously turned up at the same moment we got around there. So he took us north to around Clarence Point, showed us all the damage over on that side, and managed to get... his phone was working around Clarence Point, so we got a phone call out to our parents then and family. So that was our first sort of contact really with our families, just let them know we were okay.
It's almost impossible to imagine in the 21st century in a country like New Zealand, but you really were literally cut off from the outside world.
Yeah, we were pretty well. Our home is off the grid anyway, so we were probably better than a lot of people in some ways. We had power right throughout, so even during the night of the earthquake, so immediately after the quake, we ran around for a little while and jumped in our car to listen to the radio and just hear, well, where was this? Was it just here, or was it other places as well? So then we got a little bit of a handle, but on what was going on. But because communications out of Kaikoura go down so badly, there was very little information about the local situation, so we really didn't know, probably for 48 hours, what was going on in Kaikoura.
So you own the cafe that you were doing this interview from, which looks a lovely place, and you are also the dentist in Kaikoura. How are both your businesses, now that you've made it into town for the first time in 11 days, how are they?
Well, surprisingly, town seems, compared to what we've seen at home, town seems remarkably kind of normal. There's, people driving around the roads, pretty much compared to Christchurch after the earthquake, where all the roads were buckled and everything. That's what our home's like. But in Kaikoura Township, the roads and things are absolutely, fine and drivable. And the nice thing is, just as we got to town, we heard that the sewerage had been reinstated. So that's a real treat for us. So we might have to be able to have a shower tonight, which is going to be nice.
Luxury Chris Lidgard from Kaikoura. A 10-metre high Christmas tree has just been put up in Auckland's Aotearoa Square, and tonight the lights are being turned on, but it isn't like most Christmas trees. It's made of Lego, 500,000 Lego bricks. Our reporter Alex Ashton met professional Lego builder Tony McNaught.
We are at Aotearoa Square in not so sunny today Auckland, but we are in front of a giant 10-metre high Lego Christmas tree.
All right, and 10 metres, put that in a bit of context for us.
That's about
10 metres?
Yeah, it's about 3 stories, 2.5 to 3 stories high.
Okay. How many bricks, how many man hours are we talking about with this?
So you're looking at 3.5 tonnes of Lego. It's about 500,000 Lego bricks and took us about 1,200 hours to put together. And I've still got the Lego fingers to prove it.
Oh, I know the feeling. Did you stand on any?
Definitely not. Safety footwear is important.
Yeah, so is it a case of, so it's individual bricks, but is it literally a case of putting brick on top of brick? Or?
Sure is, yeah. So one brick at a time. And as the tree got skinnier as it went up, obviously it got easier for us. But here at the bottom each day, we would do about 5 layers of bricks. So yeah, quite a lot of work.
Is it sturdy? Is it stuck together with anything, or could you literally just unpick it as you put it together?
Yeah, no, certain sections of the tree we have to glue together. The main reason is because it's 10 metres high and it needs to be windproof, rainproof and all of that kind of stuff. So it's really quite safe and sturdy. Being such a heavy model, the pressure really compacts down as well. So yeah, it's quite sturdy.
What about quake proof in a shake? Would it stand up?
It's designed to withstand a force 9 gale. Okay, so that's a lot of wind. That's a lot of wind. And we've had some Lego models down in the South Island, and I know one in Christchurch, we had a really tall, a 6 metre high rocket, and it got a 4.5 and was no problems at all. So fingers crossed it might go all right.
Why a Lego tree? Why do we have one of these this year?
Yeah, why not? So the real trick is, this is an international thing, right? So the star, for example, was made in the US. The bricks came from Denmark. We put the tree together in Australia for Kiwi kids, and that sums up Lego. So poor old New Zealand's really been starved over the years of awesome big Lego things. So we thought, why not bring the biggest thing ever made out of Lego in New Zealand, and why not make it something for Christmas?
How long is it staying up for?
It's here till just after Christmas.
All right, and all of these Lego bricks, what's going to happen to those afterwards? Do they get chucked or?
No, this tree will stay together and it'll make someone else happy somewhere else.
Oh, right, wait, you move it whole?
Not in whole, it's all in sections, so we break it down for transport, but somewhere else overseas.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. A driver in the first convoy of private vehicles to make it out of Kaikoura since last week's quake says the drive this afternoon was a piece of cake. Dozens of cars, SUVs, trucks and camper vans have all made it through the worst section after urgent repairs to the inland route. Gary and Janine Smith used their four-wheel drive but say they could have made it in their 10-metre-long converted bus. Gary Smith says the road repairs are excellent, though the slips alongside look threatening.
Piece of cake. Put it this way, we've got a 10.5 metre bus motorhome and I wouldn't hesitate to take it through. I'd even let my grandmother drive through in a shopping basket.
Gary Smith says Civil Defence is taking precautions suited to the worst case of a very poor driver, which is frustrating for people waiting longer than they should to get out. A cinema complex and multi-floor parking spaces for 300 cars in Lower Hutt's Queensgate Mall is being demolished because of earthquake damage. The complex and parking building adjoin the shopping centre, and their demolition was announced this afternoon by the owners, Diversified New Zealand Property Trust. The company says demolition has been ordered to proceed with urgency. Eric Frickberg reports.
The Hutt Council said last night the building could collapse. As a result, the building owners decided this afternoon to demolish it, after considering then rejecting the alternative of earthquake strengthening. They say demolition will now proceed urgently because the quake damage has made the building unstable. Despite this, 80 shops in the mall have reopened, but another 60 to 70 remain shut because of their proximity to the cinema complex and the car park. Nearby buildings housing the New World supermarket and part of the Angus Inn are also closed because of the fear of debris falling on neighbouring properties. This is Eric Frickberg.
The 7-year prison term or sentence handed down to a man who pinched a woman guard's bottom is being described as barbaric. The judge who sentenced the 25-year-old says if it wasn't for the government's 3 strikes law, he would have got no more than a 1-year sentence. Here's our political reporter Benedict Collins with more.
The 3 strikes law forces judges to impose the maximum penalty if a person has been convicted 3 times for certain violent or sexual offences. The Criminal Bar Association says a 7-year sentence for an impulsive 2-second act is barbaric. Labour says the sentence is totally disproportionate, and the Greens say it's unjust. However, the ACT Party, which pushed for the legislation, says the offender got what he deserves. The Police Minister, Judith Collins, introduced the law, but today declined to comment on the sentence. This is Benedict Collins.
Several women's refuges say there's been a spike in the number of terrified women seeking protection from methamphetamine-fueled domestic violence. Refuges in Tauranga, Kaitaia and Waikato say they've had a particularly busy past few months, with a spike in the number of women seeking help for both their own meth addiction and their partners. Carla Penman reports.
P is a factor in 60% of all cases that the Tauranga Women's Refuge is dealing with right now. Its manager, Angela Warren-Clark, says women are growing more terrified of the unpredictable nature of violence at home and fleeing. In the far north, the Kaitaia Women's Refuge had a 3-fold increase in the number of domestic violence cases the police referred to it last month, many of which related to meth. And just last week, the Waikato Women's Refuge Te Whakaruru Hou referred 5 women for protection orders within 45 minutes. Ko Carla Penman tēnei.
The co-owner of a freight holding company says a proposal to bypass 2 major bottlenecks on State Highway 3 in Taranaki will make the road safer. The Transport Agency has revealed its options for a $135 million upgrade of the highway between Mount Messenger and the Awakino Gorge. Jim Ramsey runs Transport Investment Limited, which owns the Hooker Pacific trucking business. He says the agency's preference for a 6.4 kilometre bypass at Mount Messenger and to build a new stretch of road avoiding the Awakino tunnel is the right way to go. Mr Ramsey says the upgrade will save on wear and tear, improve delivery times and make the road safer for all users. State Highway 1 north of Auckland is likely to be closed until at least 7 after a two-car crash. It has closed the road in both directions in the Dome Valley north of Warkworth. The police say one person is in a critical condition and others had to be freed from the cars by the fire service. And the Transport Agency says a crash on the Wellington motorway has been cleared. And though traffic is heavy, that is normal for a Friday afternoon. Motorists have been reporting long queues heading north to Kapiti on State Highway 1. However, the agency says the crash near the Tinakori off-ramp northbound was clear by 4. It's exactly 5 minutes past 6. On to sport now. The decision review system was the major talking point at the end of a rain-shortened first day in the second cricket test between New Zealand and Pakistan in Hamilton. The players left the field just before lunch and were unable to return with New Zealand 77 for 2 after being put into bat by Pakistan. Jeet Ravel is on 35, Ross Taylor on 29. New Zealand were 39 for 1 when Pakistan appealed for a catch off New Zealand captain Kane Williamson, which was initially turned down. Pakistan sought a review with replays suggesting the ball had hit Williamson's elbow. But the third umpire ruled there was an edge, leaving Black Caps batting coach Craig McMillan feeling Williamson was somewhat unlucky.
Maybe a touch. He didn't think that he had hit it, so he was going to review it. But it was one of those tough ones that we accept. You realise sometimes it's a little bit difficult to see exactly what it's hit, but it's just one of those ones we accept and we move on.
Play will start half an hour earlier tomorrow at 10:30 because of today's rain-shortened day. The New Zealand pairing of Danny Lee and Ryan Fox have shot up the leaderboard on the second day of the World Cup of Golf in Melbourne. After a disappointing opening day, they were sitting in 22nd place in the 28-nation competition, 6 shots off the lead. But they've enjoyed an 8-under-par second round and are now tied for 7th, with the bulk of the field having completed their second round. The New Zealand tennis player Marina Arakovic has lost her second-round match at the Hawaiian Open in Honolulu, beaten in straight sets by tournament top seed and world number 23 Zheng Shuai. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, time is very hard to define. Science writer James Glick has been exploring time travel, which all began with H.G. Wells. Professor Richard Beasley, who's just won an award for, in part, his work on asthma, and Jeff Marsland on his life as a Kiwi coffee baron. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Weather now, the short forecast from our Met Service taking us through to midnight tomorrow, Saturday, for Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty. It'll rain, briefly heavy, clearing this evening. A few showers tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, high cloud with a few spots of rain. Waikato through to Wellington, also Wairarapa and central high country. Rain, briefly heavy, easing back to a few showers this evening. Showers tomorrow as well, some heavy in the west and northwesterly gales for Wellington and Wairarapa. Nelson and Marlborough, rain clears this afternoon. Further rain tomorrow, heavy and possibly thundery in the west, northwesterly gales. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, rain, heavy at times, squally thunderstorms and hail and snow. Down to 700 metres in Fiordland tomorrow. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, heavy rain near the Alps, scattered falls spreading east at times. Northwesterly gales, severe about inland Canterbury. Chatham Islands, rain later today, a few showers tomorrow. It's 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Paul. We have an answer. It's not much of a satisfactory one, but it is from NZTA in Wellington to why, if you were heading north up the Kapiti coast on State Highway 1, getting out of Wellington for the night or for the weekend, the traffic is rubbish. NZTA says, and I quote, traffic is very heavy. State Highway 1 Plymouth through to Waikanae due to a particularly busy Friday peak. And here's a really great piece of advice. Allow extra time. Wellington traffic, if you're in it and you're listening, I apologise. that we couldn't do better than that. You can't allow extra time when you've already set off, but it's just an abysmal Friday night. State Highway 1, Dome Valley, which is between Warkworth and Wellsworth, that is Wellsford, that's a nasty crash. There are diversions and detours in place, but that is really backed up there now, and the traffic is bad. There is simply nothing that can be done about that while they're clearing the road and sorting out some people who have been pretty hurt in that collision. We've got some feedback coming in that is just in the top of the rundown now. I'm multitasking, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pretty sure traffic is related to having to merge at Pukirua Bay, Paikakariki, Raumati South, and I'm guessing Waikanai, which I'm nearly close to, having left Wellington at 3:30. That came in at 6:03, so that's 2.5 hours from Welly to Waikanai, which, even allowing for crappy traffic shouldn't be much more than an hour, surely. Stay in one lane from Plimmerton. So what happens is, as you get passing lanes, people go out and then have a devil of a time merging back into the one lane. So that advice is better than what NZTA was offering. Thank you. And just before we move on, because I'm copying it in my earpiece because I'm taking too long, a wonderful email from Dunedin which shows gridlock there. There is 2 cars, but they've had to slow down to avoid a seal. Thanks, Clive. That's the kind of traffic we all dream of. Right. Let's go to Lower Hutt, where Queensgate Shopping Centre reopened today for the first time since the earthquake of 2 Mondays ago, but not in full. Whilst much of the centre is fully intact and operating as it always has been, part of it's coming down, and that's caused neighbouring premises to remain closed. Here's Peter Alexander, the manager of the company that owns them all.
So what's happening is one of the 13 buildings that makes up Queensgate Shopping Centre is going to be demolished, and that's the car park and cinema building at one corner of the whole site.
Can you put this in perspective for us? How much of the mall does this affect? Because it's a big area. I heard you on Morning Report this morning talking about an entire city block. I'm looking at an aerial picture and it is literally that. So what sort of impact is this going to have on the rest of the mall? How many shops are completely unscathed, for example?
Well, the only shops that are part, or the only tenancies that are part of that is the event cinema complex. And 300 car parks below it, roughly. So the rest of it is ready to operate again. But until we make that building safe, i.e. by demolishing it, we can't open those stores.
Okay, how many stores were open today, have been open?
Just over 80. And that includes Countdown Supermarket and the Farmers Department store. So, there's a good offering available to customers, and people have been coming in droves and enjoying themselves.
Just over 80 out of how many?
About 150 probably.
Okay, what is the longest period some of the shops, of the roughly 70 that haven't been able to reopen yet, how long do you think some of them will be closed for?
It's hard to say. We're putting together a methodology for demolition, and out of that will come a program. We'll have that done by Monday night, so we'll probably have more clarity around that on Tuesday. I would think a job like that's probably 2 to 3 months.
That's Peter Alexander, the CEO of the company that owns them all. On Wednesday night, Civil Defence issued a notice for the immediate evacuation of Goose Bay, just south of Kaikoura, of course. An aerial survey had reported a large body of water building up behind a dam formed by rock, trees and other debris from the big quake. The volume of water and the uncertain nature of the dam containing it led to real fears for the safety of the community in Goose Bay below it. But those in the community weren't convinced at all and were angrily questioning Civil Defence's decision. One was local farm owner Paul Kyung.
They said that there was a humongous slip that had caused a catastrophic dam that had enough water in it to wash out, pretty much put in danger all the residents in Goose Bay. We immediately hopped in our helicopter and went up, and we found a tiny slip with a tiny dam with a tiny pool. And we came back to the Civil Defence team, showed them the video, and they were not interested at all, and they started to mock us.
So you think evacuating Goose Bay is an overreaction?
It's a total overreaction, and then I was threatened with manslaughter. And I said, right, we'll pack up, we'll leave. This is a creek. It's called a stream. It's not a river, and it is used to carrying a lot of water through it. When it rains, because there's a very large and steep hill and mountain range in behind it. And I am blown away by
what's been said.
And there's nothing else that you've missed? There's not something further upstream from there?
We flew the whole creek. I videoed the whole creek. There were 4 people in the helicopter. This is my farm. This is the land I've grown up on, and I've hunted every nook and cranny of it. And I certainly, at this point, with all the different parties involved, wouldn't be saying things like this, just for the sake of it. So, yes, this is completely ridiculous.
So that was Wednesday. Paul Keung, we should say, was hosting a paua recovery operation from his farm. People are working along the coastline to save paua threatened by the coastal uplift, which has destroyed much of their habitat. It's going well, by the way. He was desperate for the recovery team to be able to stay at his farm. But after hearing Civil Defence remain adamant there was indeed a life-threatening body of water above Goose Bay, he took a helicopter back up there again this morning.
And we went up into another wing of the stream, and we went onto a neighbouring property, and we've noticed a very large slip on the neighbouring property, which will dramatically affect, if it collapsed, the entire Goose Bay community.
Right, so this is a separate body of water from the one you saw and described as being small and not threatening.
Correct. We actually surveyed 3 or 4 bodies of water on the Moana Farm side of the creek and all the river, all the feeds into that creek, and we were very comfortable with those. There was a team of 6 or 7 people involved in that, and today what we've done is we've now moved over to the neighbouring property, and we've noticed 2 things. One, that all the mountaintop springs have opened up through the quake, so there's a lot more water flow coming from the actual hill ranges, which is a new phenomenon that we haven't experienced before. And we've noticed that there is a very large slip up the north of our area, which feeds into the main creek that comes down into Goose Bay, which is what I would consider imminent risk.
So this is the body of water that Geonet and Civil Defence and GNS and everyone was describing, right? When they asked the community to leave on Wednesday, this is what they were talking about.
Yes, I'm sure that this was their main focus, and this was the concern that if the top, or if the one to the north gave way, e.g. we had rain or what have you, then it would pick up the smaller bodies of water throughout the stream, and then potentially could be in real trouble.
Right, so they were right, Paul?
I think they were correct, and as far as Civil Defence goes, we followed what they said, and ultimately, in hindsight, we can see that they were correct. So I've rung the engineers involved, I've apologised, and I'm in full support of what they're doing. I've provided them all the video footage that we have, and some further information about what's happening with the springs on the hilltops. So it's the best we can do.
The issue is, isn't it, that Civil Defence have to protect us, and they have to protect us in a way that is cognizant of the fact that if they don't, the buck stops with them.
Correct.
And public safety is their concern.
Yeah, I think we took offence when I think the issue was we knew our area well, and we asked them if they would take a second look because we were concerned with what they were saying in relation to what we knew of our area, and they were unwilling to, and I think that's when there was some local resistance. But we've relocated, and we've apologised for any bad press that we've caused, and we're moving on forward together.
And in terms of moving on forward together, how long do you believe that will involve you being out of Goose Bay for now?
The problem is, John, I can't comment in regards to what's imminent danger and what's not. I don't have the modelling equipment available to me. I have been privy to see some of it. It really comes down to what happens if it rains and we get a torrential rain and it's midnight, and what happens if we get further earthquakes and so on and so forth, and then this happens and that happens. So, like you said, we've got to take the most cautious approach, which we have by shifting, and respect that, we need to look out for the worst case scenario.
That's Paul Keung talking about Goose Bay and the threat that is posed by a substantial body of water above it. Lots of traffic to update you on. This has come in from Jeffrey. If it makes Wellington listeners feel any better, I've been sitting in my car at Auckland Airport since 5:32 and I've managed to move about 50 metres. Only 150 metres to go to the first roundabout, says Jeffrey. We received that text at 6:12, so Jeffrey had gone 50 metres in 40 minutes. Go, Jeffrey. But thanks for being with us, Jeffrey. Let's go to Wellington, where people are having a devil of a time getting up State Highway 1 north of Plimmerton up to the Kapiti Coast. Mark Owen, who is the Regional Performance Manager for the Transport Agency. Are you there, Mark?
Hello, John. How are you?
Yeah, good. You're good. Are you NZTA Regional Performance Manager?
I am indeed.
Look, it's Friday night and there's froth in my tea. I need to say this now, so I don't want to sound at all rude, but how's your regional performance management going? Because no bugger is able to leave Wellington by the sound of it.
No, it's a bit challenging. People decided to leave early today, so we've had a lot of traffic heading up the coast. So for those that are stuck on the coast, it is fairly clogged from sort of south of Waikanai right through Parapara Umu and down the Mackay's Crossing. Heavy around Paikokariki, and then certainly heavy south of Pukarua Bay. So if people are heading out of Wellington on Starway 1, I'd advise them just to sort of stay put for a couple of hours, because it will free up. But for those that are stuck in the queue, they just need to stick it out and just, we apologise, but it's just obviously a lot of people to decide to head away this Friday evening.
Yeah, and there's no alternative route, is there? I mean, there's no other way you can get out of town up State Highway 1, is there?
Not in terms of if you're heading out. I mean, the only other way is sort of State Highway 2 over the Rumataka Hill.
Yeah.
So the key thing is just people just need to sort of just be patient and enjoy the scenery as they're going north.
Well, in terms of enjoying the scenery, where are you going to be most stationary for longest? What bits of scenery are you going to be seeing the most of?
Well, just north of Plimmerton, people will hit the queue, and that'll take a wee while to get through to Pukarua Bay. Then it frees up a little bit, heading towards Paikokariki, and then it slows up as you head into Parapara Umu. So, maybe people could pull over there and maybe sort of have a coffee or just have a bit of a break, stretch the legs until it sort of frees up another couple of hours, and hopefully things will sort of ease up a bit.
Yeah, Vivian Lewis has just emailed and saying it's the Lake Taupo Cycle Challenge tomorrow, perhaps additional traffic heading up to the lake for the weekend. Is it usually this bad on a Friday night, or is this particularly bad?
No, this is particularly bad.
Oh,
I mean, it's always busier on a Friday, but this is a lot more traffic. And as you say, it's things like, when there's events and things happening that a lot more people leave sort of all at the same time. It sort of adds to the delays.
Will Transmission Gully eventually make a difference to this? What, in 2020, is it?
Oh, that's right. We've got the Mackay's to Peka Peka project first, so that'll be the first to open, so that'll free it up a bit. And then once Transmission Gully's finished, again, we'll have a good reliant and resilient route, and we'll have sort of more lanes available for people sort of heading north and south out of Wellington.
Thanks, Mark. Nice to talk to you. Have a good weekend. Earlier in the program, we brought you a story about Wellington businesses which have had to close during quake damage. They want the government to extend business support packages, the ones they've given to Kaikoura businesses, to include the capital. We asked our followers on Twitter what they think, and they are overwhelmingly in favour of it being extended north from Kaikoura into the capital. 84% say extend it, 16% say it shouldn't. Thanks to everyone who participated in that. Don and Donilda Galletli are dairy farmers near Waio in North Canterbury. The inland road, the Convoy from Kaikoura, travelled out on this afternoon, passed not too far from their farm. The earthquake destroyed their milking shed and they had to immediately get their cows to other farms throughout the region. Don's thankful the shake happened when it did, though, a few hours later, and the milking shed would have been full. But it's not easy being a dairy farmer when you've lost your cows.
There's about 960 gone to other farms now. So we've only got our dry stock at home.
So 960 cows. And forgive me for asking such a towny question. It's bizarre that I don't know the answer to this. But if you have 960 cows and they go to other farms, obviously they're still milking. Who gets the income from the milk?
Because if you were doing it commercially, you would mostly have a contract written up. But these people have taken these cows from the goodness of their heart to get them milked and animal welfare, and get them milked and get them look after them for me. I am not concerned about not getting in. I'd love income, of course, because we won't have anything for a while. But the big concern and the big thing for me is they're being milked, they're being looked after well. Vets are checking on to make sure they're right and helping. That any of the farmers have taken on any extra. yeah, it'd be lovely to have a shed up and be running again by next year.
Do you have income protection for situations like this, or is that? If you lose your cows, you lose your money?
Yeah, that's where we are. We're well insured for our buildings, but loss of income, no, we haven't got that cover. And talking to our accountant the other day, not many people do. It's
too expensive?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the chances of this happening are not that great. It's just unfortunate that it can happen. But normally the cows can be milked on a neighbouring farm or another way around it. But in our case, there isn't. And that's just the quake.
Yeah. And so you're planning on next season now. Will you get your shed rebuilt in time?
We're certainly working very hard. FMG are our insurers, and they were here next day, and they had engineers on the Wednesday were here to look at the shed, and we're expecting a report back shortly as to just how I think it's been okayed, that there's a problem here and they have to deal with it, so that's wonderful. And they're making a great efforts to try and make it happen before next season.
A good insurance story. We like those, Don. So we'll come back to you and check that that's happened. But at the moment, you need to rebuild and put everything on starting again when the next season starts.
That's right. Yeah. One of the unfortunate parts about it, we have about 8 or 9 staff, and just about all of them will have to go, or all of them have to go because we just haven't got we aren't able to pay them. But again, the locals have been very supportive there, and there is Officer jobs coming in now, so we hope to have 3 or 4 of them in jobs in the next couple of 3 weeks.
Gosh, what were those 24 and 48 hours like after the quake? Because obviously, and you've talked about this, the animal welfare considerations, you've got to get the milk out of those girls, right? Otherwise it becomes really unpleasant for them. So how did you get them to the neighbouring farms? The roads were closed. What were you doing?
Yes, we had to drive them about 3 miles up the road to a neighbour's yard to where they could get the transport trucks into. We took some up on the Monday afternoon and the rest up on Tuesday morning.
And what were you taking them up on, Don?
They walked up.
Oh.
They can scoot along, the old cows, when they're got the right attitude.
Can't we all, Don?
They were looking for somebody to milk them, so they were prepared to move.
Yeah. How long have you been there for?
This farm was a rehab farm, so Dad got it after the Second World War, and we're very proud, really, that my brother and I, we don't farm together, we aren't in partnership, but we're still neighbours, and the only ones they settled at are those soldiers still on the land here. So we're pretty proud of that too.
Yeah, it's a true family farm, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So I've been here all my life. You know, it's a bit of a shit of a place to be, but we can get ourselves out of it. We've got good support. We've got the right attitude. My wife's got a lovely attitude towards it. It's happened. Let's deal with it and get on with life.
Don Galletley, a dairy farmer from Waio. Punk is dead, and tomorrow millions of dollars worth of punk memorabilia is set to go up in smoke. The son of the self-declared inventor of punk music, Malcolm McLaren, has been threatening to burn rare Sex Pistols items that used to belong to his father for months. He says it's the ultimate protest against the establishment. Here's the ABC's Penny Timms.
Punk rock came to life in the late 1970s with the intention of burning down the establishment. At the forefront of the movement was the Sex Pistols, and the band's manager was the late Malcolm McLaren. With his help, their influence on pop culture was huge and controversial, and the band was notorious for its outlandish behaviour. Malcolm McLaren left a huge bounty of rare band memorabilia, including records, posters and clothing, to his son Joe Corey. But in recent months, he's been threatening to commit what many fans would consider sacrilege. He wants to burn it all, and he's chosen the 40th anniversary of the release of the band's debut single, Anarchy in the UK, to do it.
I've been wondering for a long time what to do with it all, and I think this is the right opportunity to say, you know what, punk is dead. Stop conning a younger generation that it somehow has any currency to deal with the issues that they face, or that it's going to give them any currency to create their way out of the issues that they face. It is not. it's dead and it's time to think about something else.
Joe Corey says the inferno will happen tomorrow, apparently in protest against the 70s movement being co-opted by the establishment. He says selling the wares is not an option.
For me, it was like, well, if you want to sell all this stuff, who's actually going to buy it? Who'd actually buy all this collection? End up going on some banker's wall, you know. That's who'd buy it. Then it wouldn't satisfy me very much.
Even former members of the Sex Pistols thinks items should be sold rather than burnt, with the money donated to charity. But Joe Corey isn't having any of it.
Because I think the die-hard fans are confused and they don't interest me at all. Why would I give it to them? They're just conformists in another uniform. Well, yeah, because who cares about being a die-hard fan of something that's over and become a McDonald's brand? I mean, what on earth would you want to give it to them for?
Music commentator Stuart Coop thinks few people will support that logic.
I get what punk rock was all about. I get protest. I get anarchy. I lived through that era. But these are very, 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 very important historical artefacts from a very pivotal music and social era.
But Joe Corey thinks his late father would be supportive of the plan and even get a chuckle out of it.
That report from the ABC ending Checkpoint for this week. On behalf of our executive producer Pip Keen and the rest of our fantastic team, thank you for being with us. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back Monday at 5.
RNZ News headlines now at 6:30. A cinema complex and multi-floor parking spaces for 300 cars at Lower Hutt's Queensgate Mall is being urgently demolished because of quake damage. One of the drivers in the first convoy of private vehicles to make it out of Kaikoura since the quake says the inland route was a piece of cake. Goose Bay farmer Paul Hyung has apologised on Checkpoint for dismissing civil defence warnings about a landslide dammed creek. State Highway 1 north of Warkworth is likely to be closed until at least 7 after a 2-car crash. And the Transport Agency now says traffic out of Wellington tonight is clogged from Pukirua Bay north to Parapara Umu because of people leaving town earlier than usual. Our next news is at 7.
Country Life this week meets representatives from huge beef-producing nations in New Zealand to discuss the future of beef and spreading the word about farming.
The people need to understand better what